What is going on, everybody? We are live. Thank you for joining us here at the Movie Club Emporium. And this month is going to be a lot of fun because we are talking about all things vampires. Plus, you're going to get a movie review if you stick around to the end. But we are trying a new format for this particular episode. Mostly because you say we're talking vampires. What a long and large genre of films. And as much as I'm sure Nick and I would like to sit around and watch like 120 years worth of cinema, uh, this is a little easier to digest all of it. But our main thesis this evening is talking about the differences between sexy and scary vampires. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome to the Movie Club Emporium. My name is Jason.
And I'm Nick. And
And
welcome,
every
y'all.
yes. And every single month you can find us right here at twitch.tv/, the Movie Club Emporium, where we do these fun lives. Last month, we did a really fun tribute to David Lynch. And then I can tell you right now, without spoiling it just yet, next month's live is going to be really fun. But if you can't get enough, if you're just like this once a month thing, I need more. Well, you can have it if you follow us over at YouTube with the Movie Club Emporium, where we have weekly videos going up. Now, I will be honest with you. The last few weeks, haven't had a lot of time to go to the movies, but what I've been doing is taking our old lives, because we're fairly new here to the old Twitch and YouTube scene. Most of our lives were done on the Book of Many Faces, and so I've collected all those lives we've done, cleaned them up, added some fun title cards and all that cool stuff to make them YouTube ready, and I've slowly been posting those up. So if you want to see what we were talking about in 2022, I think was the last one I put up, was our list of the scariest movies from that list we made in like 2022. Those are up.
It's been that long ago now.
Yeah.
And
And then this week is, if you'll stick around to the very end, you'll actually get a sneak peek. Because the review going up tomorrow, we're actually going to film here at the end of the episode. We're going to be talking about the new Ryan Coogler movie, Sinners. But before we get to that and all the other vampire goodness, Nick, how you doing?
I'm all right. Went back to work this last week. I recovered from hip surgery, which had pretty recently happened after last month's live. I'm up and walking again, and I'm back doing half shifts at work, which is awesome. I wish I could get paid for half shifts and if for whole shifts while working half shifts all the time. It would be awesome. Um, But luckily, from while I was convalescing, I had time to watch movies, catch up with TV shows, and get plenty of rest. But overall, I'm doing pretty great, and glad to be back here talking about this subject this month because we have a long history of talking about and watching vampire movies. How are you
Yeah,
doing?
I'm good. Good. Yeah, at work went from, with the new position, I went from doing about 37 hours a week to about 45. So halftime sounds awesome, but no, doing good. And then, like you said, trying to catch up on uh, some shows and movies. Our theater here really hasn't been getting anything, aside from like the Minecraft movie, and I'm good. I'm good. Um, we'll talk maybe like in a crunch time and maybe like December. Maybe I'll watch the Minecraft movie, but for now
Yeah.
I'm fine. Um, and then yeah, us and vampire movies, because for a while there we all kind of had our own specific genre. Like, of course, Shaw is. You alright over there? Somebody's off-screen scannersing Amber. Her head's exploding. Um, Shaw, of course, is werewolves. When we do get werewolves, we'll have to have Shaw on. Uh, Lee was slashers. I myself was the vampire guy. I believe you were the zombie man.
Zombies. That was my jam. before the mid to late 2000s really burned that out of me, but I'm coming back around.
That's okay. Looking at this, looking at some stuff that's not really did make this list, but just kind of looking at different movies. The late, mid late aughts really took vampires away from me as well.
Yeah, woo. It was some dark times during that period.
Oh. Well, how is
But
everybody in the chat doing? Um, Besides, Amber, like over here, having an allergic reaction to the internet. Yeah, Orkin. Yeah.
we feel yeah, we're a couple of working stiffs here
Oh
too.
yeah. So yeah, the whole thesis of this was just kind of like you were down and we were talking about like the different. I don't really know if we're like comparing and contrasting, but just kind of movies that work with a scary vampire, movies that work with a sexy vampire. Um,
And and I've definitely included some that will talk about that manage to cross over in both, that representations of both, because that's something that also shows up a lot in TV and movies is um, very beautiful, sexy, seductive vampires in some way, but you get to see the more monstrous, darker side of them. It's interesting to get those both in one movie. Uh, we got a pretty decent amount of that over the years, but a lot of times they lean more heavily into one or the other, clearly trying to appeal to one audience over the other, whether to really turn somebody on or to gross them the hell out. So,
yeah, and so I figured the best place to start would kind of be the beginning, with the idea of the Dracula versus Nosferatu. The key moments there, of course, for Dracula, I have 1938. You have Bela Lugosi. That's one sexy Hungarian. 1958, you get Christopher Lee, who kind of rides that line we were talking about. Of course, in 1992, you get Gary Oldman's portrayal. And then I wrote down apparently we're not done yet because Luc Besson is making a Dracula movie that's in post production right now. I did not write down who's in it, but I'm sure it'll be really weird. On
I
the,
don't know how to feel about that.
I mean, I don't know if it'll quite reach the depths of Argento's Dracula weird, but I feel like it might be weird. And then, of course,
And
Nosferatu. You have the original 1922. You have the Werner Herzog 1979 remake, and then this uh, last year with Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. So here's here's where I'm at with this story because they're both essentially the Dracula story. They're both Bram Stoker's story.
yes.
You and I both enjoyed Nosferatu.
Oh,
Um,
one of the best movies of last year.
it was, but here's why for me, Nosferatu with that story doesn't work as well as Dracula because so much of that story involves seduction. Whether it's um, with Jonathan Harker in the castle, Mina, all that stuff. Dracula to me has always been kind of like the quintessential sexy dude vampire. Um, and Nosferatu, while telling that same story, he's a monster. And so, especially in this last one, when he's just a rotting corpse with a giant mustache, like it's kind of hard to be like erotically charged by this walking uh, beast. And so, I don't know, just it was even after watching Nosferatu, I think I said in my review that I really enjoyed it. It's an incredible film, but for me, for this particular story, it comes down to Ford Coppola. So despite his best efforts, Francis Ford Coppola hasn't quite crapped on his whole legacy. because I still think Gary Oldman's portrayal and the way the use of, I don't say love, but you know that movie was marketed as kind of like a dark romance. Um, I think Dracula works best for that story.
Yes, Bram Stoker's Dracula is one that manages to fit both of these into one movie because you get to see Dracula in a variety of forms in that movie. When you first see him in the castle and Jonathan Harker's coming to visit and do this real estate deal, he's got the bizarre looking hair and he's pale and gross and wrinkly and just looks like an ancient old man. And you get when he's making the journey to London and arrives in London, you get to see him as sexy, sunglasses wearing, top hat wearing Gary Oldman, who's just like, I mean, prime Gary Oldman, he's a beautiful man, and he has that sexy presence about him that you can definitely see how Mina would get drug into that and be seduced by him. But in, you also see him turn into a pile of rats and you see him in a more beastly form at times. You get a lot of that of both. So you can say, okay, clearly this is a monster. He's utterly monstrous. He can change forms, but you can also understand why he is so appealing and why he's so seductive. I think this is a movie where we really get the best of both. Um, with and this, I mean, knowing love Bram Stoker's Dracula, it is the
Yeah,
definition of a mixed bag in
yeah,
a
that's
movie.
true. And even
But
even in a lesser degree, like you're saying, we kind of get that. I feel with Christopher Lee because you do get like 1970s like Silver Fox Christopher Lee, but then you know the bloodshot eyes and the bloody teeth and the way he can turn bestial. Because around that time, time in between those two, you have people like you know George Hamilton and uh, 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 oh my god, it's Franklin Jella. I almost said Robert Loggia would have been an even weird.
that would
Robert
have been
Loggia's
better.
Dracula. I'm
Yes.
Dracula. It's me, Dracula.
I mean, hey, we didn't get Rob. There is a Robert Loggia vampire movie where he's a vampire in it, Innocent Blood.
Oh yeah, I have that
So, but
later.
yes, that is one that I will also mention, talk more about later. Uh, I don't care. I want to see Robert Loggia's Dracula now, like 1980s Robert or 90s Robert Loggia's Dracula. Anyway, yeah, they leaned a lot more between the versions of Nosferatu, the on-screen portrayals of Dracula tended to be more attractive. Christopher Lee was an interesting one because I think he did a great job playing the Count. And part of it is Christopher Lee was suave and he had that presence,
Mhm.
but you got to see without him turning like into flat out shapeshifter. You got to see him with the bloodshot eyes and the bloody teeth. You got to see that monster come out. It was also a good portrayal uh, of Dracula being this kind of chameleon like figure who can really change his approach and how you see him. And most of the portrayals we got of Dracula in cinema have been of the more attractive variety. I mean, a lot of times, let's like we look at Bela Lugosi, not maybe exactly most women's jam these days, but you understand at the time he's like very sleek and suave and appealing, which is so very different from Murnau's Nosferatu or Klaus Kinski as Nosferatu, and especially Nosferatu from last year, who are just utterly terrifying looking. It's there's when you see the when you see people meeting him, they are very off put by his presence and how he looks, and initially think, oh, he's just a very sickly looking man, but there's something wrong. He looks bestial. He looks like there is something very wrong with him. Uh, so it's you can't really there's no way to make Nosferatu in this form seem sexy and seem anything else less than repulsive unless you have a supernatural element into it, like this. the obsession between these two, and like I think it was really done well last year,
Mhm.
Nosferatu, of she's not physically attracted to him, but there's this she is drawn to him in a way that she cannot quite explain, but it's almost like it's a drug addiction,
Yeah.
uh, which man, I think they did a great job with her, and I think Lily Rose Depp did a pretty solid job of showing that. Showing it's just she's repulsed by him, but so much of her is just drawn to Count Orlok. It's just no matter what she do, she can't resist, which is a way around the oh, I think he's human and I just think he's sexy.
Yeah.
And I think it really worked well, and I think that's something that Nosferatu did very well.
Which
He,
there is a moment, there is a film where you do get the sexification of Nosferatu, and it's a weird, like unofficial sequel to Herzog's remake that Kinski made called It's called Nosferatu in Venice, and he's playing Nosferatu, but he's like we've ditched the makeup, and he's got like the lead singer from Whitesnake's haircut. Look it up; it's wild.
uh, you had me at White Snake. Come on. As to which works better, part of it's a matter of preference between these two portrayals. Vlad Dracula, Nosferatu. I'd say in general, the portrayals of Dracula as being the more handsome, gentlemanly type work, especially if they could do things like Bram Stoker's Dracula did, or Christopher Lee's portrayal of Dracula and showing you the duality of the character. Even though, me personally, I'll tell you right now, I prefer the more monstrous versions of
Yeah.
vampires. Uh, it's hard to go wrong with the classic portrayal of Dracula that we got to see a lot over the last 100 years. Um, Even if personally, I like the Nosferatu a bit more, just for how just chilling looking he is. Even going back to the silent one, I mean, still looks terrifying. What do you think?
No, I agree, and here's one where I'll actually for me the like I said the story of Dracula always works better with like the more physical attraction to it. Um, with the exception of it's not really Dracula. But it's Nosferatu adjacent, and it's Salem's Lot.
Yes.
I think as much as I love that book, I think the 1970 nine movie of changing him from what he is in the book, which is just like a dude vampire, to that Orlok design makes that an infinitely better character. Mostly because in that book you have the Straker character, which is James Mason in the original, who is just like his mouthpiece. His um he does all the talking. He's his hype man. But then in the book, when Barlow shows up, he's also a talker because it's a novel. And so you just have like
Right.
these two talking dudes. Whereas because you go with this monster, this Nosferatu design for him, all that like wrestling manager power goes to James Mason's performance because the vampire is just a monster. Um, and so for me, that I like, and I know that it's not faithful to the source material. I prefer the Nosferatu in something like that than in just like the classic, the classic Dracula tale. But I do agree the way they portray it in in this new Nosferatu does portray it more like a drug addiction as opposed to the old ones where you're just like Isabella Nanjiani wants nothing to do with Klaus Kinski's Dracula in real life. Get
Yeah.
out of here. She turned away Sam Neill. She's not picking up Nosferatu.
Yeah. Hell no. Um, no, I the Salem's Lot from '79 is one of my favorite vampire designs, and but you're right, that is why it works because we have James Mason as Straker to be the one who's suave and gentlemanly and put on that front. So Barlow can come in and start absolutely just annihilating the town, um, which I just love. I think that I think that movie's fantastic for that, and you love that you kind of get both in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's and Barlow never speaks a word, and that makes it even more terrifying. Plus, I mean, vintage James Mason,
Yeah.
hard to beat.
Even that character is the best part of the '04 version because it's Donald Sutherland. Even though Rutger Hauer plays Barlow, and so he does a lot of talking in it too. Uh, to even more reason for that last year's remake to be my worst movie of the year is they get the guy who played Euron Greyjoy to be Straker, and he comes in, he's like, "I'm the mouthpiece of the vampire. Now, if you'll excuse me, I will be out of the picture for the next 40 minutes until my death." And then he just bucks off.
Still haven't seen it. I need to get around to it. Your scathing review of it really,
Yeah,
made
you
me
really
think.
don't. I would honestly suggest watch Vampire or Nosferatu in Venice before I'd say watch the Salem's Lot remake.
I, you had it said. You had me at white snake here. So I'm 1,000% watching that.
So the next topic we kind of looked at once we got rid of we got took down the two big pillars. Um, was we wanted to do a little something here for the fellas. And that is the idea of the temptress versus the succubus. And now this one I feel like has a lot um, to cover in both, but there are some fun titles to cover with the temptress versus the succubus. These are more, and I say these are for the fellas because these are definitely more of the definitely skewed to a specific audience.
Yes.
Um, and it is as a 14-year-old Jason. Let me tell you that. Because don't you laugh at me. We'll get to you later. Um, some of the titles I have here: Vamp, um,
Yes. That was the
Grace. Yeah,
number one movie I was going for.
yeah. Grace, like Grace Jones, is one of those weird things that like lives in the back of your lizard brain where you're like, yeah, I get it.
It's like I can dig it.
Yeah,
Makes me
especially in
feel in
that
weird
movie, man.
ways.
She is something in that movie. And then you have just, I mean, of course, the trope of they're vampires. Let's make them strippers. Um, which also happens later in another title I wrote down in From Dusk Till Dawn with Selma Hayek. Far less feet in Vamp, um, but it is still a really good, solid vampire movie that is really underlooked, but it has some killer effects and some really good performances. The actor's name, and I feel terrible because the only thing that pops in my head is his character's name from 16 Candles, and it is way too racist for the internet nowadays. So you know who I'm talking about. But he's one of the side characters in that movie.
Vamp is one of those movies that I don't know how it doesn't get talked about more. I got it in a 6 pack of movies years ago and gave it a watch, and I was thinking, where's this movie been
Mm-hmm.
my whole life? Um, and yes, part if I discovered it when I was younger, it'd probably be one of my favorite movies of all time. Just due to hey, vampire strippers. Aside from that, what a great vampire movie, and what a great creepy performance by albino Billy Drago in it as the utterly creepy and unsettling gang leader who's these characters are facing the danger inside this isolated strip club, this urban isolated strip club, but there's also a crazy street gang out getting them on the outside. So you have both those threats looming. Like you get these far out stripper performance, especially by Grace Jones. And Grace Jones, fantastic
Yeah.
in it. Um, just, but it, her stripping routine is it's like, yeah, that's about the most Grace Jones thing you'll ever see.
You're like,
But
way to
there's
go,
these,
Dolph Lundgren.
yeah, it's like Bravo, sir. Bravo.
It's like I was watching something and they were talking about Red Sonja, and you're just like, oh, Brigitte Nielsen. And I'm like, but yeah, and of course that's kind of a trope. Like we said, from dusk till dawn, and then we would graduate from strippers to hookers, and it reminds me of the time. So in the video store that was in our town growing up, the back aisle was all the horror movies, which is basically where we lived. Like you might get into the next aisle over because that's like where some of the sci-fi was. Um, but most of it was horror. And at the very end, as close to the counter as you could get, on the very bottom shelf, there was a large clamshell case, and it was for the movie Vampire Hookers.
I remember that so clearly.
And for years, we were like, we're going to rent this movie, guys. We're going to rent it. Let's do it. We're men. Let's rent this movie. And I remember we finally did it. And I think it was either Susan or it was Mary Tyndall was the name of the woman that worked there, which tells you how long we were in, how long we spent, how much time we spent there. She was just like, "Oh, boys, really?" And we're like, "Hey, man, like, don't judge us." And then we get it to the house and we pop it in, and it's just this boring, like, weird Filipino movie from the '70s with not I said David Carradine. What's the older Carradine?
John
John
Carradine.
Carradine. And like it's just a Roger Corman bait and switch with that title, Vampire Hookers, man. You're like, yeah. And it's just so dull.
I I mean that's the thing. We spent years going to 2001 video and looking at these titillating movie covers and these ones with crazy artwork, which is what gave me my love for VHS collecting. And that was one of the ones we really built up because they're like, it's called Vampire Hookers. It's got vampires who are hookers. How in the world could this be bad? They found a way to make a movie with that title that lame and boring and terrible.
And then,
It
okay.
I It takes skill to get that winning combo that absolutely wrong.
Corman, man. It's Corman.
Ugh,
And
we
then
love you,
following that
man.
train is a movie like I don't have a lot, we don't really throw around the term guilty pleasures. We did a whole live. I don't know if that one's up yet, where we called them warm blanket movies. That movies that are just kind of bad, but you just you want to put them on because they make you feel good. And one of those movies for me, I have to admit, is Tales from the Crypt's Bordello of Blood, because unlike discovering Vamp as a 14-year-old boy, Jason did discover Bordello of Blood as a teenage boy, and by golly, that movie is great.
Um, Now, in terms of it being a quality movie, it sucks.
Yeah.
Dennis Miller is terribly miscast, but holy shit, did they get some beautiful, sexy women to be in that movie? And at that age, it's like also watched it. That is the Temptress bingo.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of seeing a what other movie are you going to see with a vampire chick that has three nipples? Come on, two thumbs up just for that alone. What's the main? What's her name?
Angie Everhart is the
Angie
actress.
Everhart. I have lifetime love with redheads, much to my own demise. But just absolutely gorgeous and sexy, and it's pure trash. But that's the kind of movie that should be called Vampire Hookers. Come on.
I feel like because we were of the age when we saw that movie, like everybody of that age has that same thing for redheads. So you're not quite alone. Um, and then we got From Dusk Till Dawn comes along and gives us Selma Hayek, Santanico Pandemonium. Um,
But
but
that's another case like Bram Stoker's Dracula, where you manage to get both Selma Hayek,
yeah,
who is looking as hot as the sun, You get to see her. Then she turns into a freaky monster in a decidedly 90s portion of CGI. So you do get some of that both. Well, some of both. Although it leans way more into to the Temptress camp, I
Yeah,
would say, than the gross monster, because
yeah.
it's demoniac.
And the one mentioned in chat too, Lair the White Worm. That's an underrated movie. I like that movie. I think the design of the, I know she's a vampire, not really a vampire, more like a snake goddess or whatever, but it kind of works in the same level. Also, I'm down for a Ken Russell movie. Give me a Ken Russell movie any day.
Hell yes. I
Hashtag
I'm
Criterion for the Devils. Let's do it.
but that's the thing in just terms of the monstrous female vampires, you just didn't get that as much, or at least it wasn't as the monstrous female vampires weren't as it wasn't the primary focus because you wanted hot, sexy ladies to be vampires. Uh, you look back during some of the Hammer productions of the 60s and 70s, you got some of that. And they were appealing to the male gaze and the male audience. And, well, back in the day, we were pretty cool with that. Uh, but like in From Dusk Till Dawn, where you can get some of both, but it's a it's a classic trope, and it has brought people in. It will keep on bringing them in long into the future.
I tell you one that I'll bring up just because it was one that we saw like scenes from forever, especially if you were taking the tit test. Now calm down, it's the trauma intelligence test. Um, but they released it through Vinegar Syndrome, so I actually picked up a copy of it. Death by Temptation is an interesting take on that character, as well as one we mentioned kind of earlier, Innocent Blood, um, which is kind of uh, an interesting vampire movie because it's a pseudo companion to American Werewolf in London, with it being a weird blend of comedy and horror done by John Landis, um, involving this vampire who uh, kills bad men, and she goes to kill mob boss Robert Loggia and doesn't succeed and turns him into a vampire. Um, it's not really a great movie, but I do like the eye effects they do for it because it's one of those vampire movies without teeth, which I've always kind of not been a fan of. Give them teeth. Um, you get Don Rickles as a vampire.
The Vampire Don Rickles.
Yeah,
That is something. Um, I think it's a well-made, polished movie. I don't think the movie works overall,
yeah,
but I do not want to butcher her name. I believe she's French.
yeah.
And Perlaud. Anyway, who plays Marie the vampire? She is so sexy and seductive in that movie, and the sheer presence, accent, everything that really works. But she's also it's just like she's not like an evil vampire either, so you can sympathize with her. She only goes after truly awful people. Um, but using her looks and seductive charm to do that. Um, Death by Temptation. I think that is a criminally underrated movie. I think if you want to look at a classic among black led horror movies and black directed horror movies, you got to mention Death by Temptation. But is she a vampire?
Well, that's kind of why I lean into it falls into that in that weird thing, kind of like Lair the White Worm, where you kind of hit this gray area of not calling the vampires, succubus or whatever, but it kind of they do fall in line with um that kind of that with the vampire films that do the same thing.
Yeah, it
To me
really
they
does.
count. Yeah, they kind of they're in
It,
like a small little like they're in the room next door, but like the walls are thin.
yeah, this it's a seductive female monster who lures men in to their doom. I just if you want to see how to do a great low budget movie with great camera work, great coloring, some really damn good acting. Death by Temptation. I think it's one of those movies. Unfortunately, people will look at the name Trauma attached to it and get an idea of it,
Yeah.
and it is not that at all. I'm glad you brought that. That's one I hadn't thought of for this list. So man,
I
what
do
a great
have
movie.
I do have a couple more on this list. Number one is honestly probably the could be categorized as the sexiest vampire movie and does involve the Temptress for sure, and that is Tony Scott's The Hunger. Um, I don't know how you feel about The Hunger. I'm afraid you're gonna break my heart a little bit, but Susan Sarandon in that movie. Again, it's another one of those where I'm like, just give him teeth. But and the other actress, I cannot remember her name for the life of me. But
Catherine
that is,
Catherine Deneuve. Catherine
yeah,
Deneuve. She's another one. She has a French name. They are both extremely sexy in that movie. Um, and their lesbian romance. And that's like when you get sexy David Bowie in the movie, and it's a super sexy movie where people are lounging around, not wearing much, being all sexy. But that's the movie. That's that's
oh yeah,
full length runtime of just that. That's my problem. It was like a very beautifully directed music video, but there's just no substance
yeah.
there.
I was gonna say it's the epitome of style over substance.
It,
But we get Bauhaus's Bela Lugosi's dead. So if you're an '80s, if you love '80s goth music, then
it's like it's like well acted, beautifully shot, and music. It's just every except for the fact it's yeah, it's style over substance in movie. And that's one of those movies I remember reading about and I really hyped it up. I bought a VHS from it from the Snyder video store and watched it. And it's like maybe I'm due for a rewatch. I've not watched that in a very long time, but
yeah,
I have a feeling my opinion will probably be more or less the same on it. There's one sexy vampire movie I've got to throw out there. Sexy alien vampire movie, Life Force. It is they're like, straight up classic vampires. No, they're space energy vampires, and they act in a very vampiric way. So I'm counting it. We got Matilda May as the main, yes, who I'm not sure wears clothes at all during that movie as the main alien vampire. Draining, men who are just so smitten by her, then turning into dehydrated, crazy energy zombies. Oof. Oh,
I, I
I
especially going off of this last comment, I will say there are parts that I kind of agree with you. It does have it kind of does lull in the middle. It's kind of my favorite Toby Hooper movie.
okay. I know it's one of those movies I like in parts rather than a whole. I think it's got some pretty awesome effects in it. I find the vampires in that movie real unsettling. I don't know what it is like that when that one who's in the jail cell sprints out of and explodes out of the
Mm-hmm.
cell because he's just behind it's like his body's just withering away, or that scene and where it's just like there's a visual flyover of London where you see and people are just these energy vampires are just attacking everything in sight, and it is just such a it's like I don't know why I found it to be such a disturbing visual. And you have the giant alien vampire bat which has a cameo appearance which comes so out of nowhere. However, it really drags in the middle.
Yeah.
It really, the movie needed to be edited down like crazy. Uh, Back when we did our podcast, me and my friends did our podcast years ago, that was kind of our take. It's like, oh man, they did some really cool stuff, but it's like it slows down
The,
to a crawl.
from the escape until you get to watch Steve Railsback kiss Patrick Stewart, that middle it's just this. It's just this.
You feel it's like if they would have got a better editor in there, they would have had a better movie. But still, I think it qualifies as a pretty great example of the sexy vampire. Um, Bravo, Matilda May. Bravo.
And then the one that was on my list because I know it's number one in both of our hearts, And this is to me the best version of like the sexiest of sexy vampires, but also quite the monster. It's Regine from Fright Night 2. Julie
Ooh.
Carmen. Whoo! Whoo!
Oh, and I might be the minority. I love the Fright Night movies. I actually prefer the second one. She is so damn good, and you can and be like, if I knew she was a vampire and she was out to suck my blood, I would still be like, okay, would it really be that bad? Come on, beautiful, gorgeous, and utterly terrifying in
Yeah.
that movie. Uh, and the part of it is the way she looks at you, and she just those eyes, she's like staring deep into your soul, and you see why Charlie Brewster was entranced by her.
Yeah, because even in like in the Mouth of Madness, like I know I'm supposed to be paying attention to all the Lovecraft chaos, but I'm just like, man, Julie Carmen.
She fantastic. Said managing, in my opinion, to one up Chris Sarandon, who did fantastically in the first one. That is that's impressive, and she really helps make the movie great.
But
I gotta
I agree with you. I think a lot of if you follow a lot of like horror nerd guys, I think they kind of agree. We all love Fright Night. It's one of the best. Fright Night 2 is just a little bit more.
and it's great. Yeah, it, watch Friday Night too. That's all I gotta say. Um, I gotta Uncle Rico Werewolf. Yes, it took
Mhm.
me years to figure out that the I played Uncle Rico, whose name always escapes me, was also the werewolf in Fright Night too, and he's hilarious in that role. I love him as an actor. I'm just awful with names. Um, John Grease, that's it. I was looking here. That's the thing. It's just like sexy woman vampires. I mean, not a temptress, not a succubus. She fits into neither role, but Underworld. Kate Beckinsale in Underworld.
I
She's
I
a
actually
vampire.
I actually had her in the later category, but yeah, you're right. Like she is um I that one and then one I guess we'd kind of be remiss if we didn't mention uh cuz she is kind of the best part about that movie except unless you're just a huge new metal fan and that's Aaliyah and Queen of the Damned.
Yes, I talked about that in my. Oh, what an awkward movie! Just so awkward, and that's. And talking about yeah, that's one I was planning to bring up later, along with Interview with the Vampire. So we put that in our pocket for a bit later. But yeah, that yeah, I guess that counts.
So, now that we've all had our Tex Avery Howling Wolves drool moments, now we're going to turn to the ladies. Because now we're gonna this is the kind of the meat of the vampire genre, if you will, pun unintended, but hilarious nonetheless. And it's the hunk versus the beast. So where do you want to just start there with interview, or do we want to go ahead and just take a step back and just get Fright Night knocked out?
Oh, we just go straight into Interview since we were just talking about that. It's the '90s, and you need to make a sexy vampire movie that the ladies will love. Who do you get for the lead? Do you get Tom Cruise or do you get Brad Pitt? The answer, you get both and put them in one movie, and you make an entire generation of women go wild in the movie theater. Holy shit. It's one of those. It's pretty amazing in retrospect. Them getting that, and then also getting Christian Slater at the beginning. Man,
Oh, let us not forget about um let's not forget about Antonio Banderas. Um because you said yeah for a generation of women and you're right, but um because of the homoerotic charges of that movie, there's probably a lot of dudes who got awakened to an interview with the vampire as
oh,
well.
getting to see long haired Brad Pitt with his fluff with his big collared, lacy shirt open up. Yeah. Oh, a lot of awakenings happened that day in the theater. But
I do have questions. Mostly, I don't want specifics, but like in my mind, I'm just like, what part of the movie?
yes, the part where Brad Pitt is drinking rat's blood. That's what gets you
uh,
going.
it's when he's
It's
killing the Grand Guignol.
um and talk about leaning all into the sexy vampires, but that's the point of the movie is these beautiful guys being beautiful and sexy and definitely not gay. They're not gay in the movie, which I got a sidebar. I had a hilarious conversation with somebody I knew back about 25 years ago who told me that his favorite movie was Interview with a Vampire. And I was like, oh, that's great. And knowing some about this guy, it's like, they're gay, right? He's like, what? No, they're not. It's like, no, they are definitely gay. And the look as he was processing it and the gears were turning, and he's like, oh man,
I, I know who you're talking about, and I'm just in my mind when the movie came out in '95.
I believe so.
So I was 10 years old and was like, "Oh, those dudes are together." Like,
Yeah, it's like, and if I'm not mistaken, in the book, it's
oh yeah,
blatantly that way. And,
the,
and
the
Rice was all about that,
the new TV show really dives into their relationship in the
which
like it
honestly
is in the book.
makes a lot more sense instead of it being like trying to work around it, which I think makes things a bit awkward. But
Yeah.
at this mid '90s, that was gonna trying to get the audience they were. It was gonna cause more trouble. I
Oh, you,
understand why they made that stylistic decision, but it's also a little bit nonsensical in a way too.
the midnight. Like, can you imagine? It would just been like, oh, they would have been like birdcage characters. Like, it would have been just like super. Oh god, I mean, oh, just insanity. Just, oh yeah, it's just he's just my good friend who I've traveled through eternity for because we're just two bros. And just a
Just to
couple of confirmed bachelors.
Yep, we are eternal roommates.
Yeah. My
Um,
hetero life mate.
it's like, yeah, I want somebody to bro out with for eternity, and we'll have a daughter together, like bros do. Yeah, it's just, and I think it's funny that as obvious as it was, is that it still went over a lot of people's heads. The '90s was a weird time,
Yeah, it was.
but it's a great example of the sexy vampire movie. It's a very well made movie, a very polished movie, and it's just like on the Mount Rushmore of sexy dude vampire movies. Um, and another one that I'm really due for a rewatch. It's been too long.
It's been too long. You don't forget though that movie is super long though.
It is. I remember first watching when I was young, and it's just that part. Movies to me needed to be back in the day either super fast paced or a tight 90 minutes, and that was neither. But it's when I watched later on and appreciated it a lot more, and I'm sure I would even more at this point.
Yeah. And then so like we were talking let's do a beast one. Well, no, let's do this because it kind of ties into Interview with the Vampire, and that is we would get a better taste of that, like I said, in TV with the new iteration of Interview with the Vampire. But even before then, we were getting it in the early 2000s HBO series True Blood. It's just sexy sex everywhere in that show, both dudes and girls. Um, that show taught me to have really weird feelings about Rogue. Um, and boy, you introduced us to the prettiest of all the Skarsgårds.
It's that movie. It's a piece of erotica brought to life. That show. Um, it's ridiculous, and it's just a bunch of sexy, shirtless, bestial dudes just being sexy and wanting to win the hand of this woman. It's like, yeah, it's it's such leave Eldorado, and I hear the books are more or less the same way, where all these incredibly handsome men are after this one woman who's just a simple Louisiana waitress. Uh, I enjoy doing wrong. I enjoy True Blood as some sexy trash though,
Yeah.
but you can't miss. You cannot. You sorry, the chat's cracking me up.
Uh,
You 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 can't mention sexy vampires, sexy male vampires without mentioning True Blood. It's basically Twilight for adults, and I know
yeah.
some people probably won't like that comparison, but around the same time, that was a winning formula.
Yeah.
If you have some sexy romantic dudes who want to be in vampires or werewolves who want to be in committed relationships, it was licensed for printing money, you know, 15, 20 years ago.
And my favorite memory of that show, besides yes, I agree, Deborah Ann Woll in that show. Whew. Um, she would go on to hang out with Daredevil, but we used to watch that show, and it was so funny. Like thinking about Ashton would have been probably 5 or 6 when we were watching that show, and he would come in because he was a big theme song kid. Like he would run into the to the living room. He would watch the theme songs, the videos, and then he would leave. He didn't give a shit about the show. But like True Blood, Dexter, he used to dance to The Office when he was really little. It was really adorable. But we'd be like, "Oh, we're gonna watch this vampire show," and he'd be like, "I don't like that show." We're like, "Oh, because it's scary, vampire stuff." He'd go, "No, there's too much kissing. Too much kissing. I don't like it." I'm like, "Well, good. Get out of here before it leads to other stuff."
Yeah, that's it. It's about to go a lot further, and you'll see Rogue's boobs, which was a strange moment in my adulthood. It's like, wow, okay, but going the complete opposite direction with vampires and TV shows, where the vampires are as far away from sexy as can be. We go with one of my favorite iterations of the vampires, The Strain, Guillermo del Toro, based on Guillermo del Toro's book. Uh, these vampires are it's they are have no hair, their genitals rot off, they are riddled with parasites, and they have this giant lance that comes out their this tongue lance like tongue comes out of their mouth and drinks blood while infecting you with parasites. They are so utterly gross and disgusting and unsettling. The no sexualization. Oh, I say as maybe somebody. They're so unsexy. It was refreshing.
Yeah.
Given when it came out, we had been for years and years. We got the sexy vampires, and we got something different. We got something more horrifying. Something they were very much not human. They could, with enough costume and enough makeup, they could appear human, but it was no mistaking them. They were utterly monstrous, and I love the vampire design, and I love how monstrous they are. I think the strain, it to me, the strain is a perfect example of know exactly how many seasons your TV show needs to be, and knowing exactly when to wrap it up and not overstay its welcome. Masterfully done show.
And it was so cool to see him kind of evolve the vampire he created in Blade 2, which was such a cool idea and like horrific in its own right with the Reaper vampire. And then to just kind of take it that much further than the show. And then you get to where you get something like the look of the master of that show, which is just absolutely insane.
He's
Um,
big, and just the giant clawed hands and puking parasites into people's mouths. And just they are so. I don't think there's probably ever. I mean, maybe Nosferatu's kind of close. I don't know if there's ever been a grosser vampire put on the screen than the ones in the strain. And it's just down to the way they drink your blood and convert you. It just I like the idea of it being like a parasitic infection that takes over your body, and you get to see it in the early episodes where you have several people on that plane who were infected, and one of them, like that the shock rocker, You know, some guy checks on him and it's like his genitals are literally rotting off because it's part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, great show. Gross as hell, great show.
So, and then again, that leads to, or like we said, we were getting so many sexy vampires that you do get these weird pockets of monster vampires. Like you get the strain, and there's one I know you'll definitely want to talk about. So I'm gonna save that one for you. But the one for me is it came out a couple years ago, Last Voyage of the Demeter, which you don't ever get it's Dracula, but you don't get you don't get the cape and top hat Dracula. It's purely the Bat monster because it's the story of the boat, the doomed boat ride, um, which kind of came and went uh, theatrically, but it's actually a really fun, solid movie.
I've yet to see that. I really, that's one it said it. You're right. It popped in and out of the movie theater, and I didn't get a chance to see it. I'll be honest, I haven't pursued it since. Back to the, back to the sexy vampires. Back to Fright Night. The original Fright Night with prime Chris Sarandon as the Jerry Danridge, the next door neighbor from hell, who, and he's got that sexy 80s hair and that presence and can just charm the pants off of any woman around him while still be utterly unsettling and terrifying because he's, because here you have Charlie Brewster trying to convince people that this guy's a killer. But then Chris Sarandon strolls up as Jerry Dandridge and it's like, oh, no, 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 crazy kid. Hey, mind if I stop by sometime? And completely makes Charlie look like a flippin' idiot. And it's great. I love Chris Sarandon. He's
E-
just
e-
great. He should have been
even
in
in
more
even in
movies.
the even in the remake with Colin Farrell, like you still get that mix of super suave, super sexy, but when he does become monstrous, he's a monster,
He's
and
terrifying.
they both look fantastic as they both look fantastic. One that I actually watched on a horror movie podcast where they were taking shots at it, and I get it. But it holds a weird spot in my heart, and that's Dracula 2000. Uh,
Gerard Butler.
you
Yes.
get pre 300 Gerard Butler in that movie. You get Jerry, like 7 of 9 Jerry Ryan. Um, Omar Epps is in that movie. What's the other? Vitamin C.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Speaking of redheads,
yeah. The other chick, I can't remember her name, but she was in a um, ton of stuff. And you get, a killer early 2000s soundtrack. It's not very often you get to watch a vampire or Dracula movie and see a Monster Magnet video in it. So, like, that movie was a lot of fun. And I was a sucker for the twist of that movie. That maybe is sometime where we have to break down that trilogy because that is the weirdest trilogy
it
maybe
is.
ever.
It's a bizarre trilogy that kind of goes all over the place. Um, I caught part of Dracula 2000 several years back, and it's like, wow, this movie has really aged. Probably like every other movie that has 2000 in the title, back when
Yeah,
that was, hip and futuristic.
yeah.
But hey,
It's
sexy curly haired Gerard Butler.
who turns into a skinny blonde man in the sequel, and then in the third movie becomes Fat Red Grauer.
Yes, it is. You can't predict what he will look like next in that trilogy. I guarantee you.
Yeah, yeah. It's Jennifer Esposito. Thank you, Amber. Um, and
So,
then oh, you want to do one more scary, or do you want to jump into a sexy one?
I have one of both.
Okay.
Um, one is a movie I bought for you once upon a time. Prime sexy vampires, The Forsaken.
Yep.
You know, these hot people being all sweaty riding around out in the desert, but oh man, they're vampires, and there's this guy trying to take him down. He's sort of this sexy drifter. Everybody in that movie is just young and sexy, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, it
That's
was.
another movie. There ain't much meat on them bones.
Yeah, it was a real like, hey, are you a background character on Dawson's Creek? Do you want to come out to Arizona and make a vampire movie?
Yes, trying the guy who plays the main lead vampire,
It's he has gone on to be in some
Jonathan
decent stuff. Yeah, Jonathan Skeech
Jonathan
or
Shake.
Shake.
I do no man. I'm getting a lot of people with some hard to pronounce names this time around. I, that was one that it's. I remember I bought it for you. And we watched it. It's like, oh, okay.
It did
We
have
were
a
not
really
the
good Eve Six song in it though.
we were not the target audience for that movie. We were not single 23-year-old women, so not our jam. Um, for the Beastly, I want to talk about probably my right up there with my favorite portrayal of vampires in movies, uh, and that is the vampires from 30 Days of Night. I love 30 Days of Night. And some parts of it probably haven't aged too well. But I like to keep one thing in mind with vampires, and that's that they are not they are not they're not human. They vaguely appear human, and they have human shape, and they wear clothing, but their black eyes, their gnarly teeth, the fact that they're constantly covered in blood and their faces are covered in blood, and one thing that I think really knocks it home is they talk this different language. They aren't us. They only appear like us in a very passing manner. They are these cunning, cruel, intelligent apex predators as they're tearing through this town and hunt and driving people out of their homes and hunting them down. Uh, and there's that one scene where Danny Houston has that woman out in the street and she says, "Oh God," and he goes, "God, no God," and then they rip her to pieces. The vampires in that movie are utterly terrifying. They can problem solve. There's no bounds to their cruelty, and they'll just tear you to pieces. They're animals. They're monsters, and I think that beyond the fact that it's a cool premise anyway, the representation of vampires in that movie is fantastic.
Yeah, and it is so funny though that it's directed by David Slade. Like in the middle of like Twilight Mania, we dropped 30 Days of Night, which kind of in a weird way kind of follows the same path as John Carpenter's The Thing, because at the high, you have all this talk of the alien to be is E.T., where the vampire to be at the time is Edward Cullen, and then we're like, no, here's something totally messed up. Here's a monster, and then he would go on to direct one of the Twilight movies, arguably the best one. And I say that knowing that they're the Twilight movies, so like judge that scale down where it is. But
On that note, we got to talk about them. The Twilight movies.
yeah,
We We're talking about sexy vampires, especially sexy men vampires. Um, you have reached the levels of popularity as the Cullen family in the Twilight movies. I
I'm just
think
gonna
those
call them the
movies,
Twilights from now on.
the Twilight, sounds like a '50s doo-wop band or something.
I was gonna say it's the next Marvel team up movie.
That tracks. I think those. I hate those movies. I do, but I remember going with the woman I was with at the time to go see the first one in the movie theater, and wow, it's like the women in the audience were like making noises and moaning anytime any of the sexy dudes came on screen or took their shirts off or anything. It it was it's ridiculous. But it was also, I mean, this massive pop culture phenomenon, which here in 2025 we are still filling. We're gonna get a TV series or a bunch of remakes at some point, and
Yeah,
they're going to utterly suck. But I said I don't know if you have any thoughts about them. I hate them, but you can't deny their impact.
I do, but I'm gonna zig when I should zag because I've been called out in the comments. Um, I do remember going to see like knowing nothing about it, having not read the books, and we just saw the poster, and they're like, "Oh, it's a vampire movie." And so Amber's like, "I'm gonna read the books," and she read them, and she goes, "I want to see it." I was like, "Cool, we'll go." It's only fair because on our honeymoon, I dragged you to see Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, so I owe you this. So we saw the first one in the theater, and I was like, "That wasn't good, but that's fine." You know, it's I went. I'm pretty sure I went home and watched a vampire movie. I want to bring up here in a little bit, like to get that taste out of my mouth. Um, but it was the second movie that put me in the hospital. um, we went to the movies. We went to a restaurant where we ate frequently at the time. I ordered the same thing I always ordered and ordered before and after the incident. And we're sitting in the theater, and I'm just watching New Moon, and I'm like, I would rather like slowly be eaten by ants. Speaking of a callback to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, than have to watch this movie. And I just remember I kept getting hotter and hotter, so hot in the theater, and like just women, like you said, the fawning and the noises, and I'm like, he's supposed to be 16 years old, because that's when the first of shirtless Jacob shows up. Um, by the way, I don't enjoy those movies, but we can all agree, Team Jacob, right? Jacob's not a 150-year-old vampire trying to hook up with a 16-year-old girl.
That's the less creepy option, I'll say.
Yeah. Um, but I remember then I was like, I'm so hot, and we went home, and I took off my hoodie, and I was just covered head to toe in hives. Never have had, never have I ever had hives before or since. And we had to go to the emergency room, and they like put me on this drip. They're like, he just had some wild allergic reaction. We were in the emergency room for hours, just laying there watching George Lopez on TV because that was the only there was no remote to the TV in the emergency room. Um, so Twilight put me in the hospital. Um, you know, it's kind of like sex sent me to the ER, but it wasn't mine. It was like
Twilight,
secondhand.
Twilight Hospital. I want to see that TV special.
Right? Um, we are gonna get to the one mentioned in the comments because obviously we're gonna save that one for kind of the last I think of this block. But one that I want to talk about because it is my favorite vampire movie, and I think while they are a little more human, somewhat than 30 Days of Night, they are more beast than sexy. And that is John Carpenter's Vampires. I loved Tom. Is it Thomas Ian Griffith?
Yes.
Okay, one of
Yes.
them is an action star, and one of them was the kid from Rookie of the Year, and I can't remember which one's which. But the not Rookie of the Year one, the not American Pie kid. I love that movie. It's my favorite vampire movie. I don't know why, but it is. I've like I said, I've told the story before. I wore out my VHS of that movie. And then depending on the statute of limitations, the story I probably won't share. I did say if I ever met John Carpenter, I would share it with him, knowing that he could not give less of a shit about it, but just knowing I got to tell him. Um, but there you do get. I mean, you get. He's a good looking guy, and you get Cheryl. Not Sherilyn Finn.
Wasn't
Laura
it
Palmer.
Sherilyn Fenn?
No, it's Laura
No.
Palmer. Cheryl
The,
Lee.
the, o- the other one from Twin Peaks.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Laura Palmer herself as vampire. Um, and she's smoking hot in that movie too, before and after the vampire thing. Although hooking up with the lesser Baldwin, I don't know. But that's always my favorite vampire movie, and it kind of, like I said, they are more human-like um in 30 Days of Night. But like there's not a lot of seduction going on in that movie as much as they're just
No,
cutting
no,
heads off and Mark Boone Jr. gets cut from scrote to throat and when he attacks the hotel room.
yeah, that motel room attack is just great, and it comes out of nowhere. It's just they're partying. It's like, yeah, we took out a vampire nest, and he just walks in the room, and starts murking them all. I, while not, while not one of the better, I say technically better John Carpenter movies. I love John Carpenter's Vampires. It's fun. James Woods is super miscast in that movie because the guy who's supposed to play in the book, Jack Crow. I've got the book here.
The book is
Uh,
really good. I like the book a lot.
Jack Crow's supposed to be this, muscle bound big dude, and which is one thing you can say what you want about James Woods. He's not a muscle bound, intimidating guy. That's more of like a guy who seems like a really unsettling chain smoker who just ran out of cigarettes. So
I mean, he is better cast in that movie than Dennis Miller is in Bordello of Blood, but not by a lot.
no, it's just he has some weird ass like the where he's asking the priest if the beating he gave him was giving him a boner. It's just
Yeah,
weird lines in that movie, but some cool action. I like the idea of there being a church sanctioned action hit squad.
yeah,
So
I love that. No, you're good. I was reading too, and I do have a spot for that movie on here in a little bit. So we don't worry. Don't throw out your Luke Evans fan club stuff just yet. We are going to get to that movie. Um, I'm trying to think if I had anything left. Oh, as a Beast one that we're familiar with and familiar with, but you may not be familiar with the idea. This movie has like 6 sequels, and that's Radu and Subspecies.
yes, that's what wrote a lot of this list. Yeah, and talk about bestial and hideous and ugly. Um, I think some great makeup effects for that.
Uh, yeah, he looks great. It's weird because he kind of play. He is really kind of like a Nosferatu, but they give him a good set of like 90. He has a good like 90s bad boy boyfriend haircut.
Yes,
But he has that voice that he does. It's just and those are some weird movies, man.
they're pretty out there. Um, somebody's looking through the horror section in the 90s, like, oh, I love to interview with a vampire. Oh, here's another vampire movie that bring home subspecies. Yeah, they're in for an interesting night, that's for sure.
And
Bestial
even
vampire.
there's a new one. I sorry, just a tangent. There is a new subspecies movie that came out like a couple years ago with the same guy playing Radu, and I may be wrong if it's not like a direct
Wow.
sequel. It's a prequel. It's full moon, so they're like, whatever, just do it. Nobody's watching this.
I remember reading about this, like, really? Another subspecies movie? Bestial Vampire, one movie I got to bring up. It was like, it, people were thinking, oh, this will be a big hit. It came and went in 2011, probably way too long after Underworld and as Priest from 2011. Uh, yeah. Okay. It's a stupid movie. It is. I can't help but enjoy it a little bit. You have Paul Bettany as a cross shuriken throwing priest. And the vampires in that movie they're like quadruped crazy looking monsters. They're not remotely human in any way. The only thing they can kind of convert, it's like you have Carl Urban who's sort of the hybrid, but they are a very different take on vampires. I will never defend that movie as being good, but I can't lie, I was entertained, and I bet it
That's
is like milk on a hot July day.
that guy. we've talked about doing an episode about people in movie jail for whatever reason or the other. What happened to that guy? Because he made Legion, which, like Priest for you, I enjoy. It's the Angel Terminator, but I
I
like
enjoyed
that movie.
I enjoyed Legion. Yes. Again,
Priest,
not
Priest,
great.
Priest is a fun watch. In as much as you'd be like, I wonder what it'd be like if we just like white people tacoed an anime. Priest is that
Yes.
movie.
It is very much, and I think they had high hopes for it, and it did not work out. Ooh, he also directed Dark Skies. I
Okay.
need to get that.
So the last two on this list I've got one is the big one, and then one is one that kind of gets overlooked, which is actually really good, and especially considering the cast. But it's the same director. One of them is Blood Creek, where you get Michael Fassbender and a Nazi vampire. It's not a great movie, but it is really kind of cool. It's a cool design. He's just really nasty, gnarly looking vampire. Um, but the big one, the main event of this is it's got to be the Lost Boys, man. Uh, just every hunk from the '80s on one movie. Like you're Emilio Estevez away from this being Young Guns Vampire Edition. Kiefer Sutherland. Even they even make the grandpa from Gilmore Girls look kind of sexy in this movie. Like it's insane.
Wild. Every everybody's so good looking in that cast, and it was funny because I had an older person tell me you know, they remember when that came out. A lot of people, apparently, well, at least some people, treated it kind of like our generation treated Twilight of these pretty boys aren't real vampires.
Yeah,
I I would say Lost Boys is objectively a much better movie and a much better representation of vampires, and
yeah,
it isn't. Yes, yes, there's a lot of eye candy, but that's not the whole movie. That's not the whole point of the movie. And you get the handsome Kiefer Sutherland with the mullet vampires, but you also get to see them being bestial with their teeth and their eyes, or hanging upside down like bats, which is a aspect of that. I thought that was such a brilliant touch having it, and they're like, oh, we're gonna go in there in their coffins. They're hanging like bats.
yeah,
I loved that. So it's in a movie where we get both, although leaning more into the pretty boys.
yeah. I mean, just because a vampire wears a crop top, I'm looking at you, Alex Winter, doesn't mean you can't be scary and sexy or legit vampire. No, I love the Lost Boys. Like it's to me, it is almost the perfect blend of the two. Because you do get all this eye candy, and even if you're like, oh, I'm tired of looking at Jason Patrick and Kiefer Sutherland, um, Jamie Gertz is just on your periphery. Um, I mean, if you're really hard up, Diane Weiss is.
I think Diane Weiss was looking very attractive in that movie.
Yeah.
Myself said just
Even
beautiful.
Grandpa's getting some in that movie. The old Lord of the Widow Johnson or whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
taking the taxidermy next door.
yeah,
I, I mean, the camera work, the absolutely banging soundtrack of that movie. Uh, My Little Sister's great. Of course, Tim Capello, I still believe,
yeah,
which I love introducing that to people who have never heard it or seen that segment of the movie, and I love that Tim Capello has leaned into it and has like managed to ride that out for decades and is still doing like convention circuits shirtless with a saxophone.
that,
You, sir, are an American legend.
yeah. That's funny because you think like, the people when that movie came out, they're like, "Oh, I'm tired of all these sexy vampires." I'm like, I mean, yeah, they're good looking, but there is a moment where a shirtless goddess wearing a chain, like a Herculean chain, playing the saxophone is in the middle of that movie. And what's funny to me is you watch that movie, and that scene especially because you have like they're at the concert, and then like Jamie Gertz like keeps turning around and looking at her, and if I'm Corey Haim, I'm like, the fuck are you looking at, dude? Look ahead. Like, who cares? That's a girl. Look what is happening in front of you. So, and then We talked about the sexy TV vampires, a show that you would expect, like it should have been the foregone conclusion that they would do sexy vampires, and they don't. It's Supernatural. Their take on vampires is more bestial, where they don't have the traditional fangs. It's more like just shark teeth that come down in front of their other teeth, like just rows of teeth that come down in front of their human teeth. And
which
they're
is a
play,
design I really liked.
yeah, and then they are played more. They're less sexy, and it is treated more kind of like an addiction. Speaking of addiction, you could throw in Abel Ferrara as the addiction with like prime Lily Taylor and Christopher Walken too.
At the end of it, again, as I think there's definitely a place for both. And we have like The Lost Boys, one of my favorite vampire movies. You get both in one movie, and I think that's ideal. But to me, vampires at the end of the day are monsters.
Mm-hmm.
They are monstrous. They're apex predators. I love um, the bestial vampires and the takes on them. They have been my favorite for a long time. Although there's plenty of room for both, and I think you have great examples of both.
No.
And we get a lot more examples of the sexy male vampire movie and TV show. But yeah, at the end, it's like 30 Days a Night, The Strain. Those are some of my favorite takes. But some of the others, utterly fantastic portrayals.
Yeah. And then our last kind of like grouping we had is, and this is where I definitely want all you guys in the chat, and you guys have been very lively, and I really, really dig it, is the wild cards. Is there movies that maybe don't, kind of like we talked about Lair of the White Worm, or, Death by Temptation, where maybe they don't fit exactly, the square peg doesn't quite fit in the round hole, um, but still, are worth a mention. Something like, uh, Abigail from last year or 2 years ago. The little girl
Yes,
vampire movie, which is
the
fantastic.
ballerina vampire movie.
Yeah,
Yes,
Let the Right One In. Um, or you get to some more artistic vampire movies, stuff like The Reflecting Skin or Chronos, going back to Del Toro.
Kronos
Um,
is
and the big one for me on this list was Martin. He doesn't really fit. No offense to that dude, but Martin is not a sexy character.
no, he's more of the creepy incel vampire.
Yeah.
I've got rather harsh opinions of that movie, which I will save for another time. We do a retrospective on George Romero. Uh, One I throw in that list too of I would classify them more as monstrous in a white trash monstrous way. That's Near Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine Bigelow's vampire epic. That
Yep.
I love Near Dark. The family vampires in that movie, they are dirty, sweaty, nasty, live in an RV that probably smells like straight us, and just going around tearing up biker bars and eating people. Um, they fit into the category not perfectly, although I tend to say they're a little bit more monstrous. They just look like people. They don't even have fangs in that movie. But that's still a great movie. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. What we do in the shadows, you get, as you get the comedy. Renfield. I wouldn't say Nick Cage is sexy in that movie, but it is a weird,
No.
interesting take on vampirism. To me, because it was mentioned, Dracula Untold, to me, kind of falls into that realm of like Underworld, where yes, they're a vampire, but we're not really. To me, it doesn't really fit the mold of the vampire movies. They're action movies. Although I will say, for that time to kind of kickstart like a new Universal horror, at the time Luke Evans was a good casting choice. It's just I feel like um, with everything going on with like the Hobbit, because I think that came out around the same time as like the second Hobbit movie.
I believe so.
He was everywhere. He's even in that movie. Speaking of trash movie that I kind of like, The Raven with John Cusack playing Edgar Allan Poe. Uh, oh my God, mom's gonna. Yeah, that's. It was. Oh my God, it was the guy. He was the guy from the nanny. And mom's got a date with a vampire from the '90s. It was Caroline Ray from Sabrina, and the guy, like the English guy who married Fran Drescher from the nanny. He was the rich guy in the nanny. You know, Nick, you watch the nanny all the time. Don't lie.
Yes, it was my favorite show growing up.
um, Going back to TV vampires, one just because why not talk about it? Because it's a fantastic series. Forever Night. You had the TV movie with Rick Springfield, which is a pretty good looker in the '80s. Um, it's not that great of a TV pilot movie. The actress, the actor
Yeah,
who they get to come in as Nick Knight for the TV show is fantastic.
yeah, he's
Um,
much better.
that's a really fun show. Because you get Vampire Cop, and then the last little bit I had was some video game stuff because we didn't mention it. Of course, the big one, haha, pun intended. From Resident Evil Village, you get Lady Dimitrescu, which turned every guy into loving a giant woman. uh,
Another,
and
another character that I'm sure caused many awakenings in a lot of people across the
oh
lands.
yeah, and there was another one I had in my head, and then I lost it. Yeah, it's. I mean, there's just so much, and like I said, we the idea of the breakdown of to me they both equally have their place because there are several instances, most of these instances where one would not work in the opposite movie. Like you can't do Interview with the Vampire and it's like, uh you get I don't know, Danny Houston and the Nazi vampire just like traveling through time in love with each other. In the same regard, you can't have 30 Days of Night and it's just a bunch of Pitts walking around Alaska. You know what I mean? You can't.
Yeah, they're rocking one in Alaska shirtless, be like, hey, we come out of the house, I'll be in a committed relationship with you.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. Somebody in the comments mentioned Blade. We're going to be going more in detail into the Blade movies in the future, and some of those. Um, you, we love the Blade movies, especially Blade Two. Talking about, we mentioned him in passing earlier about the re, uh, re, the
Reapers.
Reapers.
Yeah.
Who are such a cool vampire variant. I love the fact that they preyed on other vampires. So we're going to go in depth
Yeah.
to the Blade trilogy and other movies like that a little ways down the line.
Although I will point out even the Blade trilogy, you have that first movie, you get sexy. I think this may be the only time he's ever been called sexy. Deacon
Stephen Dorff.
Frost, Steven Dorff, yeah. Well, either it was me just now, and then like the execs at the old Blue Electric Cigarette Company that ever called him sexy. Him in that first movie, and then in the second movie you get the Reapers. Oh, speaking of weird, sexy vampires, we didn't even mention Udo Kier in Andy Warhol's Dracula, which is a wild, weird movie. But Udo Kier has always had this weird like it's like he's weirdly, especially young Udo Kier, and you see him and stuff like that, and Suspiria's, where you're like, I find him kind of sexy because I'm afraid to not kind of find him sexy.
He's the kind of guy that demands you find him sexy.
Yeah.
And I mean, those striking eyes of his.
Oh yeah, can you imagine Twilight with like I don't know, um, with a scary
Uh,
vampire in it? I could.
Count Orlok, Twilight.
Yeah, like Klaus Kinski. No, Klaus Kinski running around the high school. Get out of here.
Something tells me that probably happened at some point. Klaus Kinsey was a fucking lunatic.
That's yeah.
Genuinely, he was a crazy person. We should talk about him more in length at some point.
Whew.
But say, this time as you talked about earlier, the subject of vampires is such a wide topic. That's where kind of looking at one representation with the other, talking a little bit about each movie, you know, some of the movies that represent them. And I agree, they both have their place. Putting both in the same movie, I think, is ideal. But we've been blessed with a lot of variety in various vampire movies and things that are vampire adjacent, like Lair of the White Worm,
Mm-hmm.
like Life Force, like Death by Temptation. So, some really great representations out there. And no matter which way you like it, if you like the sexy ones and just want to see shirtless dudes or topless women, there's plenty of those out there. Whatever you enjoy, I'm with you. That's not be a guilty pleasure. You like what you like. Even if the Twilight movies are utter shit, if you like those, that's cool with me.
But we can all agree because there's the other vampire video game I was looking right at and forgot. Our background here, Castlevania 64. Fuck that game. Fuck that game.
You just didn't like it because the skeleton crawled up on your back and hit you in the head and killed you.
That
I
game was
remember.
so stupidly hard. Fuck that game.
You never. That game, I quit that game because of the mission where carrying the nitroglycerin and never went back to it again. Anyway, yeah, that's one of the more bullshit entries in Castlevania. That in Castlevania 2 for NES, where you have to go crouch in the corner and wait for a tornado to carry you off. Who the hell came up with that? Okay, random tangent over.
All right, so we're gonna have to break this video up here. So I guess we'll kind of wrap up this live and then stick around. Don't go anywhere because we're gonna time code it and then shoot our review for Sinners. But before we get to that, thank you guys so much. This has been a super fun chat going tonight. I really enjoyed the talk on vampires. You guys didn't suck at all. I can make jokes too, Amber. We've had a lot of fun. Next month, I will go ahead and spoil it right now. You are going to want to not miss next month because our theme for next month is 90s virtual insanity. I don't have the complete list of movies that we're going to break down, but we're talking 90s virtual reality movies. So plug in your 6 gigabyte desktop computer. See if you can get that Quake 1 or Tribes update to finally load up here, and we're going to talk some 90s virtual reality movies next month. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, the chat has been under blast this time. I want to plug my new friend Ben. He has a channel on YouTube, 3-minute movie reviews, under the name Fuenke666, FUENKE 666. He's got a lot of talent, and I've really enjoyed what I've watched thus far and putting on a lot of stuff. So go check him out. Ben, I want to say I appreciate you coming by and supporting us. You have added so much to this conversation today. And you put me off track many times because of the comments, especially the story about Interview with a Vampire. Sorry. Yeah, and we'll get around to Sinners here momentarily.
Yeah. So then yeah, tomorrow the video goes up. All our videos go up every Sunday, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, over on our YouTube channel. This week will of course be Sinners. Next week I am looking to do Until Dawn. I'm trying to get Ashton to watch with me because he's played the game. I have not, so we'll kind of get how it holds up as an adaptation or just a fun horror movie regardless. But that'll be next week's review. But until then, thank you guys for hanging out. And again, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. But until then, we will see you guys next time.
Later, y'all.
Bye.